Joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline, columnist for the News and Observer, Luke DeCock. Or should I just not, should I call you columnist for the News and Observer or Chief Boo Corrigan hater in charge?
I don't hate Boo Corrigan. I just think he bears some responsibility for the travesty that happened on Sunday. So and a lot of people, Joe, want to give him a free pass, and I'm not sure why.
Maybe I'm one of them in this case, and that's fine. I guess I'll own that. So you wrote a column that really was an extension, in my opinion, an extension of a larger thread related to the current state of the ACC. And you and I are in agreement with Randy Woodson. If you're going to make decisions like this, I think a lot of us are owed some answers. What is your thinking? And nobody at NC State wants to talk. And I talked about this with Joe before we even hit record. For guys in your position, you as a beat writer, Joe, Luke, you as the columnist of record, and you want some answers. And when you run into people who keep throwing up that brick wall, you know what? Fine. Let's just put this out there. So I totally get where you're coming from on that particular angle. But when it comes to the college football playoff, I think there's a misunderstanding of what the committee chair is supposed to be and what he's supposed to do. And Boo Corrigan is essentially a guy like other committee chair guys ahead of him that have to go out there and just take the bullets, man. He's the committee chair, but he's not the final say. They take votes. He might have an opinion. He might have defended FSU, but ultimately the vote is the vote. And he's got to go on TV and say the chat GPT answers that any other conference commissioner, AD that's in that position for the committee chair would do.
See, that's where I disagree. And maybe it's just because I just spent the last year immersed in U.S. Basketball Writers Association business, chairing board meetings, because I've spent the last 25 years watching the Centennial Authority operate. On any board, on any authority, on any committee, if the committee chairman isn't the loudest voice in the room, if that person isn't chairperson, if that person isn't directing debate, if they aren't shaping debate, they're the ones who bring things up for vote. They're the ones who choose what's discussed. So in any of those situations, Joe talks about this with Barry Alvarez. Barry Alvarez overruled those committee chairmen in those years. Those were weak chairmen. If a committee does something that the chairman doesn't want it to do, you are a weak chairman. You control what comes up for a vote and when. You control what's discussed. You control the tenor of the debate. And we've seen that in the Centennial Authority. Philip Isley dragged that group into the arena redevelopment. It had to be done. Not that they're bad people, but that was a real leap of faith for people whose investment is in making sure that building is safe, financially safe, infrastructurally safe. He had to basically tell them, no, it is time for a radical change. And we are going to do this. And I'm going to drag you into this, not necessarily kicking or screaming, but I'm going to make you make these decisions. On the USBWA, same thing. There were contentious issues. We had those discussions. But in the end, I wasn't bringing that to a vote until I knew I had the votes. Now, the committee is a little different because you're working under a time schedule. But here's the thing. If the committee did something Boo Corrigan didn't want it to do, then he wasn't a strong enough chairman. And he should have set the debate in terms that made it so the discussion happened. So when Joe Tessitore is sitting there during the ACC championship game and those 13, 15 committee members are sitting there listening to him talk about how Florida State shouldn't be in, and they're all sitting there scratching their chins with their calcified football brains thinking, hey, because people are influenced. You've lost the loudest voice in the room. Now, I don't know that that's what happened. I'm just giving an example of a scenario like that.
So my point is, okay, but this is where I'm going to push back. Hold on a second. I'm going to push back on this particular part of it because you actually just hit on the real issue. Joe Tessitore is calling an ACC championship game as an ACC partner. That is not a Boo Corrigan problem. That is an ACC whole ass problem.
Yeah, but my point is
Jim Phillips, who is not pushing along the narrative that should be the case. That's not Boo Corrigan's job, man.
No, it's not. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Okay. That's a whole different discussion. My point is when those threads come into the room, as committee chairman, you have to address it. You have to say, hey, look, we have a job to do here. It doesn't matter what Joe Tessitore thinks. The last 2 weeks, we've put Florida State in the top 4 without a quarterback. If we are going to make a change now, how do we justify that? So here's my point. You break it, you buy it. This is a flawed process. They didn't move Florida State down before. They are now. They've ignored all their metrics. My point is, either the process is broken and you screwed it up, or you wanted this to happen.
No.
Those two things. To quote Joe, I told you I was going to do it. This is what the money is for. And it's not the money here. It's all the national TV time and chairman of the committee, 2 years of it. You want all that acclaim. You want to be the football guy. You want to be Mr. CFP. You want to do all that stuff. I honestly don't think he does, but it comes with the territory. Yeah. In the end, when the thing breaks, you buy it.
But it's been broken. That's the thing. But that's the thing. You're making this a boo issue when the entire process has been broken for a decade, Luke. Well, no. It doesn't matter who the committee chairman is. Every single one of them who sat in that chair has done the exact same thing as Boo Corrigan.
Well, they had a different
scenario.
No one's had this scenario.
We're talking about committees.
First of all, holy smokes, radio guy.
No,
calm down.
Absolutely not. Because the committee, the reason why I get worked up is that we fall into these little narrative traps with forgetting how these things have been going for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, in 10 years, this is a unique scenario, independent of Boo's role in all of it.
Yeah.
This is the first time you've had 5 legitimate options for 4 spots. When they sat down and got together and said, hey, one of us is going to get left out every year.
Yeah.
That's what the money's for.
But this is the same. You're right. That is what the money is for. But this is the same group that will come up with things like game control. It rained on one team and didn't.
But it's a different group.
You can't yada, yada, yada.
No, it's a different group.
Process.
It's a different group.
But that's my point. Every single group has their own flaws.
That's the broken part.
There's no set criteria. Boo's just a symptom of a larger problem. So I don't understand why Boo is getting...
It's a unique... This was a unique year. This was a unique situation.
Okay.
And to that point, Joe, here's why. When push came to shove with an ACC person in the chair, the ACC got shafted. So whether that's his fault or not, he's got to own it. And it's, as we've talked about, as you guys talked about yesterday, as I wrote, this is extraordinarily damaging for the ACC.
Yes.
And people are like, oh, it won't matter next year when there's 12 teams. Who do you think's getting teams 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11?
Ding, 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 ding.
Guess who's staying home this year if it's a 12-team playoff? Louisville, right? Like, this is, you guys are right. You said yesterday, I said in my comment, the ACC has been relegated. I wrote this in August.
Yeah.
They're becoming the AAC. They went and turned the ACC into the AAC. And look, next year SMU comes in. Guess what? You're going to get screwed 2 years in a row if you go 12-1. So and look, the point of having your guy on the committee is to act as a stopgap, is to act as a circuit breaker, that when that discussion comes up saying, hey, you know what? You know, if Michael Penix got hurt, you think Washington's getting left out of the playoff? Is to have your guy in the room and say, hey, let's think about this. Put your finger on the scale to make sure the nuclear option doesn't happen.
I think you have it right. The mistake that was made by this committee, and I'm kind of ambivalent towards whatever Boo's role is and what it was or what it wasn't.
Sure.
The mistake that was made was 2 weeks ago, not putting Florida State at number 5 and telling them, here's what you have to do to make the playoff. That we are humans. You need to impress us. And by trailing Florida in the fourth quarter and escaping against a bad Florida team, I don't care if they're your rival or not, is not impressive.
But the SEC, Joe, the SEC is so good.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, if I'm the committee, I am spelling this out for you, Florida State, so that on Sunday, nobody's sitting here going, now, wait a second, why did you jump? To your point, why aren't you following any of your metrics? Why is the only piece of the criteria that you're following is this injury availability clause that
hasn't mattered to this point?
Right?
Yeah, it's the last one.
So I think there's their mistake in not setting the thing up. To your point, just real quick, 2 years ago, and this is like almost a larger question about what do athletic directors do? What does an NCAA president do? What does a league commissioner do? It's a little bit like our Supreme Court decision. Like, I know it when we see it. 2 years ago, and I'll use Elliot's name here, and that's fine. 2 years ago, NC State got left out of the NCAA tournament with Tommy White. Remember, they hit all these home runs, and they got left out. The chair of that committee was from Mississippi State. The last team that got in was Ole Miss. Elliott swears to this day the reason that Ole Miss got in and NC State didn't was because the chair of the committee was from the SEC. And to this day, I argue with Elliott, why would Mississippi State want their rival in the tournament?
Right.
And he's like, because That's what the SEC does. We don't do that. The SEC does do that. Postscript, Ole Miss won the national championship that year.
Now,
so they might
So you get to the larger problem. And if anything, you two are ultimately making my point for me by constantly pointing out other instances where these committees have failed, where these committees' process has been wrong. You and I both agree about the Florida State positioning thing or the Alabama positioning, how they go from 8 to 4. They box themselves in. If Florida State is as bad as they say they are without Jordan Travis, why are they still ranked ahead of Georgia and Ohio State? Because if you were to play these games, well, hey, man, they're going to get crushed based on your criteria, your eye test and things like that. But again, it is a 10-year process.
Have no criteria. That's the problem.
And every year they make boneheaded decisions.
They change the goalposts every year.
To borrow a line from Jay-Z, Boo Corrigan just happens to be the latest guy on the Summer Jam screen. He's the latest committee chair that's going to get dunked on by everybody. That's the role you sign up for, and that's where we will all agree that's what the money is for. But to make this Boo Corrigan as some guy, the guy holding the knife that ultimately killed the ACC, I think is a mistake. Because the ultimate issue here, you talk about circuit breaker, Luke. Circuit breakers do break. They can be overloaded. As somebody who's had an old house for a very long time, it don't matter. Sometimes the microwave and the blow dryer are going at the same time, and it's going to go, okay? This is where, to Elliot Avon's point, where he's convinced the SEC is out here to do things for the SEC, I think we can all agree that this is a problem that starts at the top, and that the ACC got it wrong with the hiring of Jim Phillips, who, for whatever reason, refuses to play the game. Or he's playing a game that is different than what everybody else is playing, and that's going to leave the ACC in this terrible position that they're in right now.
Even if you take the most positive takeaway from Jim Phillips, which is that he's actually super effective working in the corridors and quietly and just doesn't make a big deal of it. It hasn't worked.
No.
Right? Like the proof is in the results.
Yeah.
Whatever Jim Phillips is doing, whether he's good at it or bad at it or is doing or isn't doing, it's not working. It hasn't worked. And the ACC has been left behind every time. My favorite thing of all of this, when you go back months, is the Ben Sutton text. So Ben Sutton, for people who don't know, founder of Learfield, very powerful man in the college athletics sphere, very close to Wake Forest. Ben Sutton sends Randy Woodson, among others, Boo Corrigan, a text that says the ACC is always getting left behind. This is our chance to act proactively and add Stanford and Cal. Like, you're picking third in the Pac-12 draft. This is the definition of acting reactively. Acting proactively was buying the Pac-12's rights in April and becoming a rights holder instead of picking over the leftover bones. The point is, nobody in the ACC is thinking this stuff through well. I mean, maybe you can say, I mean, even Florida State, we mocked them all summer. We can't turn around now and say that they were right to be talking to the Saudis and setting up live football or whatever. I mean, that was dumb at the time. We're not going to retcon that. But in the end, nobody in the ACC is making the right decisions for the league, for their schools. It's just crazy. I don't know that all goes on Jim Phillips. And we've talked about this before. Like Mark Emmert, some of your job is to take the blame for your bosses.
Yes.
But I also think the lack of leadership from Jim Phillips, from the presidents, from the ADs is really catastrophic. And if I'm someone like Bubba Cunningham, who's trying to kind of do things right and saying all the right things about sticking with the ACC, I'd be really frustrated that it feels like every single person around me is letting me down.
Right down to the bowl fiasco. Like,
right down to the bowl. I mean,
clearly,
now, anyone who understands the way the ACC works is going to be totally unsurprised that A, they did not have a contingency plan if Florida State didn't make the playoff, and B, that the bowl process lasted hours was a complete mess, and the bowl reps are talking publicly. The bowl reps, these people make a living not pissing people off. The bowl reps are out there talking shit about this process. The only good part of it, guys, and let's take a step back and appreciate the good things when they happen. The vibes on this one, Notre Dame getting screwed by the ACC bowl process is almost worth all of this. The fact that they told Notre Dame they couldn't go to any of the tier 1 bowls. I just think, like, it took 12 years, whatever it is, but maybe someone in Greensboro/Charlotte finally woke up and maybe realized that Notre Dame football wasn't acting in the league's best interests all this time.
Yeah.
That maybe the call was coming from the inside. I think that's almost worth all of it.
And we'll close on this because I find it fascinating. People seem to be misunderstanding my ultimate point about Jim Phillips and fighting. Okay. You have to go out there and get your hands dirty to fight for the league. If there's a narrative problem, you know who can correct the narrative problem? The commissioner.
Sure.
Greg Sankey does an excellent job of being a puppet master for how people talk about the SEC. Brett Yormark went more Gen Z of, I'm going to go, basically, I'm the main character and I'm going to be out. I mean, he fought Texas. He was talking crap about Texas, giving little subtle shots and things like that on their way out. And the vibes around Yormark were good. Meanwhile, whatever the media strategy is coming out of Charlotte is fascinating to me because they refuse to talk. I know for a fact that ESPN was looking for Jim Phillips to talk. For whatever reason, he did not do any media availability yesterday. So I did a search. Jim Phillips, ACC. What was the first hit? Like, give me the most recent hit.
Before you do that.
Yes.
In order to fight, you have to want to fight.
I agree.
And I think that when they hired a lifer from the Big Ten, from a small boutique Big Ten school, like, we all kind of laugh at my concept of the irate Gilio conference.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But man, give me one of those crazy Tennessee fans. Give me a crazy State fan. Give me a crazy ECU fan. Give me a crazy App State fan. Because you know they're going to fight. This guy from Northwestern who is cashing a lot of checks from Big Ten money, right? I mean, if you really want to go back and look at what this guy ever really did, they had like a Northwestern day at Wrigley Field. Awesome. Like, what are we talking? Again, it's all in the eye of the beholder.
I got you.
Right?
I got you.
It's all about who you know too.
Yes.
And I'm sorry. I'm going full conspiracy on this.
Here, I'm gonna trump you.
Let's go.
I'm seeing your conspiracy theory and I'm raising you and I'm going all in. Is there any single action that Jim Phillips has taken, anyone, his entire time as ACC commissioner, that hasn't inevitably benefited the Big Ten? Maybe by omission.
I knew I could get. I see you were like, Joe was giving me crap earlier, like, man, the radio guy, calm down. No, I was dragging it out of you. I needed you guys. I'm like, let's go, give it to me.
Yeah, but
stop being
it just
measured.
requires
give
you.
It to me.
No, it requires you have to want to fight.
Yes,
and you say whatever you want about John Swofford. You knew the man cared about Carolina.
Hey, here's the thing.
He pulled in Jim Delaney to help him when Carolina was in real trouble, sir. Okay.
Let me ask you this. If John Swofford is ACC commissioner, is Florida State in the playoff?
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Zero doubt in my mind.
There would have been let's be honest about Swofford, though. He would not have been doing a bunch of media hits, but but
he would have been ninjaing this.
Yes. There's a reason why he earned the reputation.
And to my point earlier about Phillips, you might not have seen Swofford out there in public, but you would have seen the results.
Yeah. Now, which gets me to my close.
Real quick though.
Yeah. What's your conspiracy?
No, it's not even conspiracy. Well, it's all related to Kevin White. They all learn from Kevin White, and it's all this, cottage Pollyanna, 1958 NCAA nonsense. No, but it's backwards thinking. It's stuck in the past thinking, and they all have it. All of them who worked for him and all of them who revere him have that mentality. Other than Bubba, and I'm not sure he ever worked for him, other than he was, he's in the tree. Their only play now, because before you get to this, and I know you want to do this, but the ACC has one play, okay, and I'm tired of hearing about Notre Dame is never going to join a league. Here's where you work behind the scenes, and you tell whoever this playoff committee is, and I know who's on it, but you tell them. The only way you're going to get in is if you play a minimum number against Power 5 teams. You tell ESPN to put that in the effing contract. You got to play 10 games against Power 5 opponents. You're going to play. Who's going to get that? Well, all ACC teams are going to do it. All SEC teams are going to do it. All of these fake Big 12 teams are going to do it. You know who's not going to have 10? Oh, that's when you apply pressure. Okay? Fish baits. Why you're not telling Jim Phillips to do this, I don't have a clue. I just solved it all for you. I continue to solve all of your problems without even asking or rewarding me financially. But that's your pressure point, and you use the pressure point. What was the point of hiring all of these Notre Dame people if they weren't going to conspire together to get Notre Dame to do something?
Well, again, name one thing Jim Phillips has done that hasn't benefited Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean, the whole, really, that to me is the great conspiracy.
Well, there's that.
Is this a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy situation?
If there was,
they're going to have to bring back John Swafford and have him sit there like Alec Guinness solving the mystery.
John Swafford's too busy chilling at the beach drinking Bud Light Limes, man.
So was George Smiley. They brought him back.
He is not coming back, dude. Bye.
Well, George Smiley didn't. He did end up running the circus at the end. But at any rate, Gary Oldham. We need Gary Oldham on the ACC network.
What is Jim Phillips? What is his signature? What is the thing that we're going to point to in the Jim Phillips era? I have it. Because with all these things going on, as the world is burning around the ACC,
SMU ACC 2024 ACC champion.
Let's go, right?
I'm voting for them in the preseason poll. I've already. As
the three of us are disaster girl watching the ACC's house burn with a smirk on our face. All right, what has Jim Phillips said anything? Let me do a search and see any hits on Google. All right, let me get on Twitter. Jim Phillips ACC. Here is the top hit. Luke, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
This is from the Triad Business Journal. So far, Jim Phillips said the ACC's relocation from Greensboro to Charlotte has been over-delivering. But the conference commissioner said Greensboro remains a big part of ACC history and future. That is your top hit on a Monday after Florida State and the ACC is burning.
I forgot he moved the office.
Bravo. Just
because it's what Syracuse wanted, not what he wanted.
Kent Severud was angry that he had to miss the connection one time flying to Greensboro.
That's the way to close it. Luke DeCock, columnist, News and Observer. All right, man. That was a spirited discussion. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.